Arizona basketball gets hosed in a big way in a game that it still probably deserved to lose.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. Locked on your team every day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now we got a lot to get through this show. We are going to talk about Arizona basketball getting completely hosed against BYU, but it was still a game that Arizona probably deserved to lose at the same time, if that makes any sense. I know that doesn't make a ton of sense, but that just kind of is what it is at this point. All right, now, Arizona, first and foremost, did not play great basketball. Defensively, this was a game that Arizona was just not good in. I don't understand the Tommy Lloyd insistence on never blitzing on a pick and roll. You're essentially just allowing teams to just do what they want. That makes no sense to me at all, and it's something that Tommy Lloyd allowed to have happen in this game, and that's something that you can't have, especially against a team like BYU, where you know what they are trying to do. That is the issue. You know what BYU was going to try to do. They were going to try to get you to play down, and then they basically ate you alive off that pick and roll, getting to the hoop, getting easy shots. We need to talk first about Tony Padilla and what. Listen, I referee men's basketball leagues. I have for 10 plus years. Pretty good leagues in Tucson. Again, am I some like college ref? No, definitely not. I'm not even close to that. But I will say that I generally have a fairly good idea about how reffing is supposed to happen, how this is all supposed to play out, where you're supposed to be on the court. And I will say this before we get into that call. Tony Padilla has always been the official that makes calls out of his position. And you might say, well, Mike, what do you mean by that? Well, thanks for asking. What I mean by that is that Tony Padilla always is he is the that call against Trey Townsend should absolutely have not been made by Tony Padilla. That was not his call. Should have had nothing to do with that call. That was not his call. But he made that call from 25 feet out with the official who's standing right there looking at it. And he doesn't confer. He just comes in and he makes that call. That is not his call. He's done that at other points. He did that with Caleb Love in the and one. He is an official that tries to make the game about himself. He has always been that guy, and that's a problem. If you know who an official is, and this is a very good point that was made. If you know who an official is, then they're probably not doing their job, and that is 1,000% true. He makes the game about himself, and you saw that with that Trey Townsend call. That is not a foul. And as Brad Allis said on another platform, not only is that not a foul, that is also something where nobody makes that call at any point in the game. You always hear the term, well, do you make that, or is that the call that you make at that point? And like Brad said, you don't make that call ever, period, point blank. You don't make that call ever. But again, that's kind of what Tony Padilla's MO is. He's going to make that call because he wants to be part of the game. That changed the game. That was obviously Arizona went from likely winning that game to losing that game because of that call. Now, there's other things that we need to talk about in all of this, obviously, but that was an atrocious call by Padilla, and he's been known to do things like that. That has always kind of been one of his MOs, one of his shticks. So that's where we're at with him. Arizona had a lot of other things that it didn't do well in this game, but Tony Padilla was certainly at the forefront of some of these problems for the U of A. So you can't really have that be the case. But Tommy Lloyd talked about it, and he said, we also played terrible defense. And this was a game that it felt like Arizona was going to lose throughout. This game did not feel good at all. Not only did it not feel good at all, it also felt like this is like Arizona just did not bring also just Arizona just did not bring its A game here. And in a spot like that, you deserve to lose. BYU went crazy from three. You're 14 to 31. I get all that, but Arizona also let them get to the spots that they wanted to on the court, and that's something that just can't happen. You can't let a team just get to where they want and shoot. You knew BYU was going to look to spread this one out, and they were going to look to shoot those corner threes. That's what they do. Again, I'm not breaking any news here. I'm not telling you anything that you all don't already know. That's what BYU was going to look to do, and they did exactly that. And Lloyd talked about it. This was a terrible defensive performance for Arizona, and in a weird way, I'm actually okay with losing this game, even though you never want to lose any game. But first, PrizePicks, my friends. PrizePicks, PrizePicks, PrizePicks. Now, the great deal with PrizePicks is this. March basketball is almost here, and there's no better way to get in on the action. Again, with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you pick more or less on the last two player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to $1,000 your cash. Now, here's kind of how it works. Like when you're building a lineup and you're saying, I'm looking for Jason Tatum to get more than 29 points and Anthony Davis more than 12 rebounds. You can go by what you are seeing and say, this kind of feels to me like how this is going to play out, and you can make these picks in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. Fast payouts. When you win, the money hits the account in as little as 15 minutes, so no waiting around. That's the other great thing about it. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. And again, March Madness coming here. It is right around the corner. This is the time to hop in on all of that. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. Locked on your team every day. Okay, now let's talk a little bit then about Arizona and the defense and the turnovers as well. Defensive. If this is a game you can learn from, I think you feel a lot better about it. This is hopefully a game that you can learn from. If you can learn from this game, then it's all good. But there's just too many things that this Arizona team does that just make absolutely no sense. And a big problem that they have is they continue to turn the ball over. And these turnovers are they make no sense whatsoever. These turnovers are ones that you're like, all right, well, that's going back the other way for 2 points. You don't like that. There's nothing good about those. These aren't dead ball turnovers. These aren't turnovers where you're like, all right, you need to have that. You need to have that stop. Nope, you don't have that. Now, and everybody on the team does it. Jaden does it. Caleb does it. KJ Lewis does it. They all do it, and it makes no sense because, again, this is a tough team, but they really kind of box themselves into a corner with some really odd decision-making. And, again, I'm not exactly sure why this happens, why this is the case, but it's the case, and it's something that Arizona has to correct, and they've got to correct at some point. And they got to correct at some point here in the near future if they are going to correct it. I mean, who knows? Maybe they're not going to correct it. I don't know. But it's got to be fixed, and it's got to be fixed at some point here soon because it's just not good the way that Arizona is going about doing this. Then with so again, your turnovers and your defense, these are just sloppy performances. You did not get the sense that Arizona was going to play a great game in this. It just did not feel right. I got to give Caleb Love a ton of credit in that game, though. Caleb Love was an absolute monster. And not only was Caleb Love an absolute monster, he was when he came down, he wanted those free throws. He wanted those shots or those 3-point shots. He wanted every last one of them, and that's why I kind of feel comfortable with Caleb Love in spots like that. He wanted that, and he took advantage of it. Arizona in that spot isn't a good spot, but again, this also comes down to you have to have a team that defensively wants to get after it, and if they don't want to get after it, then it kind of is what it is at that point. And I think you got to start wondering Why won't you get after it? Why will there be these lapses where you're just not into it? You knew what BYU was trying to do in that game. You knew exactly what they were trying to do, and it didn't work. I mean, well, it worked for BYU, but they were able to get to the 3 point line. They were able to kick and drive. They were able to do a lot of different things, and it just doesn't make sense to me why Tommy went with that. But you know, it's that was his decision. So I think as an Arizona fan, you just got to be like, all right, well, that's what Tommy wanted to do, so that's what Tommy wanted to do. But it just doesn't make a ton of sense to me because Arizona's a better basketball team than BYU. You did not, especially after winning that game at in Provo. You don't want to come right back and then give them the game that you just gave them. And that's exactly what Arizona did. And that's something that I just don't know why this keeps happening with this team, but it just keeps happening with this team. And that's kind of where it's at. You want to be able to, win these kind of games. But, if you don't bring your best effort, then guess what? Sometimes you're not going to win these games. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk one last time about Padilla. Then we're going to talk about Utah here in just a second. But first, FanDuel, my friends, FanDuel, because there is something unique about this game and FanDuel that we can actually tie into each other. All right, here's the great deal with FanDuel. When the game tips off, and the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off, you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you could stay in the action. And if you're looking to get a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into same-game parlays. That's the great part about this. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. But also with FanDuel, there were a lot of people that thought that this Arizona game was going to hit the over because of how BYU shot. And the thing about it, too, is that BYU has been the team that has Arizona, when they've been problems, they have not defended the three well. That came back to bite them. So again, if you thought about that, you could have got that at FanDuel. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke, your team every day. Okay, now, at the end of the day, Tony Padilla stinks. It is what it is. You can't ever make that call. I think that's probably the worst call of the college basketball season. You don't make that call at any point, let alone from 35 feet away. Padilla is one of those guys that he gets excitement from being part of the game. That's always kind of been his shtick. That's always kind of been his MO. It's no secret. And Padilla is, I don't think that there's anything, I don't think that I'm really breaking any news on that with Mr. Tony Padilla. But at the end of the day, Arizona also did not play good basketball. There's no way around that. Arizona did not play good basketball. Arizona deserved to lose that game because you didn't defend the three, and the turnovers, 10 turnovers, which led to 22 points. That just can't happen against a team that you are physically better than, but it seems to happen, when Arizona gets careless, that's what happens, and you lost that game because of that. You knew that BYU coming in was BYU could easily win that game, and Arizona just didn't bring it. Now, I do think that when I look at Arizona, I do think that I'm like, I do kind of like how this team is built for March. We're going to see how that does play out. But overall, I think this team is built to be able to make somewhat of a March run. We will see. But, again, they got too many situations where they just kind of beat themselves up. They kick games away. You can't let that one happen. And unfortunately, that's just the case. You can't let that one happen. So, now, tomorrow, though, got to get back on it. You got Utah. You got Utah coming up on Wednesday. You got that's a game that Arizona's got to be able to win. Arizona's got to take care of business against Utah. You've got to be able to get into that get that win back, move to 13-4 in conference, because then you got Iowa State coming up. You're most likely not beating Iowa State at Iowa State. That's going to be a difficult game. You also got Kansas on the road. I get all of that. But if you're Arizona, you got to be able to take care of business in this game, and you got to be able to move forward from there. But as always, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Bear down, back the A, and we will be back with you tomorrow.